The sound of champagne popping echoed through the presidential suite as I watched through my phone. My best man and fiancé toasted with my Dom Perignon, laughing as they sprawled across my honeymoon bed. The hidden camera I'd installed captured everything, their kisses, whispers, and plans for their future, using my wedding venue next month. I smiled, tapping the hotel's app to order their first round of room service, caviar, oysters, and a $500 bottle of wine. "Enjoy," I whispered, adding a generous tip and charging it all to the room. They thought I was devastated, hiding away after discovering their affair yesterday. They had no idea this wasn't my first time living through this betrayal. This time I was prepared. 3 months ago, in what I've come to think of as my previous life, I walked into our apartment early to surprise Vanessa with concert tickets. I'd snagged front row seats to her favorite band, a small victory in my campaign to be more spontaneous, something she'd been asking for. The sound of laughter drifted from our bedroom. Not just her laughter. Someone else was with her. I still remember the way my stomach dropped when I pushed open that door. Mike, my best friend since college, the guy I'd asked to be my best man just a week earlier, scrambled to cover himself with our sheets. Vanessa's expression morphed from pleasure to shock, to calculated concern in the span of 3 seconds. "Nathan," she gasped, clutching the sheet to her chest. "It's not what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. They spun a story about wedding stress and a one-time mistake. Mike couldn't look me in the eye as he gathered his clothes from my bedroom floor. "Brother, I'm so sorry," he mumbled. "We never meant to hurt you." The pathetic part? I believed them. Or rather, I convinced myself to believe them because the alternative, facing the complete betrayal of the two people I trusted most, seemed impossible to bear. When Vanessa cried and begged for forgiveness, I gave it to her. When Mike swore it would never happen again, I accepted his word. The wedding plans continued. I threw myself into making everything perfect, as if the perfect ceremony could somehow erase what I'd seen. I should have known better. On our wedding day, I stood alone at the altar as whispers spread through the church like wildfire. The pitying glances from relatives, my mother squeezing my hand, my father's barely contained rage. 200 guests and no bride. The text came at 11:42 a.m., exactly 18 minutes before Vanessa was supposed to walk down the aisle. "I'm so sorry, Nathan. I can't go through with it. Please forgive me someday." What she didn't mention was that she was already at the airport with Mike, boarding a flight to Bali, the honeymoon destination I'd spent months planning for us. The aftermath nearly destroyed me. I liquidated my savings to cover non-refundable wedding costs. Friends took sides. Most drifted away, uncomfortable with the mess of it all. I fell into a depression that affected my work, my health, everything. 2 months after the non-wedding, driving home in a rainstorm, I hydroplaned on a bridge. I remember the terrifying sensation of weightlessness as my car broke through the guardrail. The world spinning outside my windshield, the dark water rushing up to meet me. Then darkness. I woke up gasping for air, tangled in bedsheets, my bedsheets, in my apartment. Vanessa slept peacefully beside me, her engagement ring catching the early morning light. The calendar on my phone read May 15th, exactly 3 months before our wedding date, 3 months before she was supposed to leave me at the altar. I was certain I'd had an elaborate nightmare, some manifestation of pre-wedding anxiety. But then I noticed details that matched too perfectly. The specific arrangement of our furniture that we hadn't changed in months. The crack in the bathroom mirror from when Vanessa had accidentally hit it with her hairdryer. The exact messages in my email inbox. For days, I tested this rebirth theory, predicting small events that should have been impossible to know. A surprise thunderstorm when the forecast showed clear skies, the exact score of a basketball game, a minor stock market dip that affected one of my investments. Everything happened exactly as I remembered. Somehow, impossibly, I'd been given a second chance. I began making subtle changes to my routine, watching how they affected the people around me, especially Vanessa and Mike. I took different routes to work, rescheduled meetings, suggested new restaurants instead of our usual spots. I observed how they adjusted, how they exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. With the clarity of foreknowledge, patterns emerged that I'd been blind to before. The business trips that mysteriously aligned, the late work nights that left her smelling of unfamiliar cologne, Mike's increasing presence at our apartment, always with some flimsy excuse to stop by. I documented everything in a password-protected file, dates, times, inconsistencies in their stories. The evidence mounted, confirming what I already knew. Their betrayal wasn't a spontaneous mistake, but a calculated affair that had been going on for months. But there was more. Fragments of overheard conversations and accidentally glimpsed text messages revealed a deeper conspiracy. Mike hadn't just fallen for my fiancée. He'd seen me as an obstacle to overcome. My best friend since college was drowning in debt from failed business ventures, while I'd been steadily climbing the corporate ladder. He coveted my life, and Vanessa was just one part of it. Together, they weren't just planning to break my heart, they were planning to break me entirely. The knowledge should have crushed me. Instead, it crystallized into something harder, colder, and infinitely more patient. I had months until the wedding day that would never come. Months to plan. Months to ensure that this time the ending would be very different. I was chopping vegetables for dinner when I heard Vanessa's hushed voice from our bedroom. She'd said she was calling her mother, but the tone was wrong. Too intimate, too secretive. "I can make it work," she whispered. "Nathan's swamped with the Johnson project anyway. 3 nights should be perfect." I didn't need to hear Mike's side of the conversation to know what they were planning. In my previous life, their first work trip together had been to a vineyard resort 3 hours north, a romantic getaway disguised as professional development. It had happened exactly 3 weeks from today. When Vanessa emerged from the bedroom, her cheeks were flushed. "Mom sends her love," she lied effortlessly, sliding her phone into her pocket. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my voice light as I slid the knife through a carrot. "Just wedding stuff." She kissed my cheek. "Oh, I meant to tell you, there's this marketing conference next weekend in Sonoma. Last-minute thing, but my boss thinks it would be good for me to attend." I nodded thoughtfully, as if this were the first I'd heard of it. "The wine country trip? Sounds perfect for you. How long would you be gone?" Her eyes widened slightly. I'd made it too easy. "Just Friday to Sunday. Is that okay?" "Actually," I said, setting down the knife and turning to face her, "why not extend it through Monday? You're always saying you need more time away from the city. This Johnson project has me tied up anyway." The mixture of relief and guilt that flashed across her face was almost comical. "Really? That would be amazing." She hugged me tightly. "You're the best. I promise I'll make it up to you when I get back." "I'm sure you will," I murmured into her hair, already mentally drafting emails to my boss. 2 days later, I walked into my manager's office with a proposal. Our new product launch was approaching, and we needed to impress potential investors. In my previous life, my colleague Ryan had delivered the presentation and botched it spectacularly. This time, I wanted the opportunity. "The thing is," I explained confidently, "I've been researching the Sonoma Valley tech community. There's a conference there next weekend where at least 3 of our target investors will be present. If I could secure a meeting space at their hotel, I could deliver our pitch directly." My boss was skeptical at first, but my prepared statistics and confident delivery won him over. By Friday, everything was arranged. While Vanessa packed for her marketing conference, I casually packed my own bag. "Last-minute work thing," I explained when she noticed. "Nothing exciting, just need to review some materials with the team on Saturday. I'll probably crash at Ryan's since we'll be working late. She bought it without question, too preoccupied with her own deception to notice mine. I arrived at the Madrona Vineyard Resort 6 hours after Vanessa, checking into a room I'd specifically requested, directly adjacent to the hotel's small conference center, which also happened to be next door to the suite I knew she and Mike had booked. The hotel manager greeted me warmly. "We've set up the Cypress room as requested, Mr. Foster. The audio system has been tested and is working perfectly." He handed me a key card. "Is there anything else you need for tomorrow's presentation?" "Actually, yes," I replied, lowering my voice conspiratorially. "The acoustics need to be perfect. Could you ensure the volume is set higher than usual? I want everyone in the vicinity to hear clearly." The next morning, I stood before a group of genuinely interested investors, my presentation materials displayed on a screen behind me. I had deliberately scheduled this for 10 a.m., exactly when I knew Mike and Vanessa would be waking up next door, basking in their illicit romance. "Trust," I began, my voice carrying through the high-quality speakers, "is the foundation of every relationship, personal and professional." I paused, imagining them freezing on the other side of the wall. When trust is broken, the damage can be irreparable. I moved through my presentation methodically, weaving in pointed references to loyalty and betrayal that would mean nothing to the investors but everything to my eavesdropping audience. The thin resort walls worked perfectly to my advantage. For my closing remarks, I reached into my pocket and withdrew my grandfather's ring, an antique band I'd shown Mike months ago when planning my proposal to Vanessa. "This ring," I said, holding it up for the investors to see, "belonged to my grandfather. It represents a legacy of integrity that spans generations. Just as he passed it to me with the expectation that I would honor its history, I offer our partnership to you with the same commitment to trust. I knew Vanessa would recognize it immediately, not just from my descriptions, but because an identical ring now sat on her finger, gifted during my proposal 6 weeks earlier." The investors were impressed, complimenting both the product and my unique approach to building client relationships. As we shook hands and exchanged business cards, I wondered what was happening in the suite next door. Were they arguing in hushed tones? Was Vanessa examining her engagement ring with newfound suspicion? I got my answer the next day when she returned home a day early, claiming the conference had ended sooner than expected. Her face was pale, her usual confidence visibly shaken. "How was your trip?" I asked innocently, embracing her at the door. "Fine," she said too quickly. "Just busy, a lot of presentations." "I know what you mean," I replied. "I had to give one myself yesterday." Her eyes snapped to mine. "You did? For what?" "That work thing I mentioned. Nothing exciting." I shrugged, then added casually, "I stayed at a resort near Sonoma, the Madrona. Beautiful place. Room 214. Have you ever been there?" The color drained from her face. Room 216, directly next to hers and Mike's suite. No, she stammered. "Never heard of it." Over the next few days, Vanessa grew increasingly paranoid. Mike stopped answering my calls, citing a heavy workload. When we finally met for our regular Thursday beer, he could barely look me in the eye. A week later, Vanessa tearfully confessed to having inappropriate feelings for Mike, but swore nothing physical had happened. I forgave her immediately, playing the understanding fiancé, relieved that she had come clean before anything serious occurred. "I'm just glad you told me," I said, holding her as she cried against my shoulder. "We all have moments of weakness. The important thing is honesty." Her tears soaked through my shirt as she promised it would never happen again. But my campaign of subtle psychological warfare had just begun. Over dinner the following night, I casually mentioned, "I've been thinking about the honeymoon. That oceanfront villa at the Kayana in Bali looks amazing. Room 507, right? With the private pool? Vanessa's fork clattered against her plate. The Kayana had been her and Mike's choice for their post-betrayal getaway. The same villa, the same room number. "How did you know about that place?" she asked, her voice tight. I feigned confusion. "Didn't you show me the website a few months ago? I thought that was the one you liked." She nodded slowly, but the seed was planted. I could almost see the questions forming in her mind. Had Mike been talking about their plans? Was someone watching them? How much did I know? That night, as she slept fitfully beside me, I smiled into the darkness. The first cracks were appearing in their conspiracy. Soon, those cracks would become fissures, then chasms, wide enough to ensure that when the final blow came, they would fall separately, unable to cling to each other as they had in my previous life. The soft blue light of Vanessa's phone illuminated our dark bedroom at 2:17 a.m. Through nearly closed eyes, I watched her frantically delete text messages, her thumb tapping with muted urgency against the screen. She glanced at me nervously, but my breathing remained deep and regular. The perfect imitation of sleep. When she finally set her phone down and curled away from me, I waited another 20 minutes before carefully sliding out of bed. In the bathroom, I scrolled through our shared cloud account, where her messages automatically backed up, a feature she'd forgotten about when we synchronized our devices months ago. "We need to be smarter about this," she'd written to Mike. "I think he suspects something." "Impossible," came his reply. "You're being paranoid. Nathan trusts me completely, then explain the Sonoma thing. And how he knew about the Bali resort. Coincidence. Has to be. We've been careful." I returned to bed, lying beside the woman who was systematically betraying me while plotting my ultimate humiliation. In my previous life, I'd been blindsided by their deception. This time, I was 3 steps ahead. The next morning, while retrieving my running shoes from the back of our closet, I discovered wedding venue brochures hidden in Vanessa's drawer. The same locations she and Mike had scouted after abandoning me at the altar in my past life. Instead of confronting her, I left them exactly where I found them, and formulated the next phase of my plan. "We should have Mike over for dinner more often," I suggested casually over breakfast. "I feel like I've been neglecting our friendship with all this wedding planning." Vanessa nearly choked on her coffee. "Mike? Why?" I shrugged, spreading jam on my toast. "He's my best man, and he has great taste. Maybe he could help with some of the wedding details? The venue choice is giving us trouble, and he's always had an eye for that sort of thing." The panic that flashed across her face was delicious. "I mean, he's probably busy with work." "Nonsense. I'll call him today." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I want everything to be perfect for us." Over the next few weeks, I accelerated our wedding plans with an enthusiasm that clearly unsettled Vanessa. I proposed elaborate honeymoon options, researched extravagant venue upgrades, and frequently expressed how I couldn't wait to spend the rest of my life with the most honest, loyal woman I've ever known. Each declaration was a twist of the knife, forcing her deeper into her web of lies. The more devoted I appeared, the more trapped she became. Meanwhile, I executed my countermove with meticulous precision. One evening, I deliberately left my laptop open on the kitchen table while taking a shower. On screen was a draft email to my mother with the subject line, "Big news, don't tell anyone yet." "Mom, just had my final interview for the Singapore position, and it looks promising. They're offering a substantial salary increase and relocation package. I haven't told Vanessa yet because I want it to be a surprise after the wedding. She's always talked about wanting to travel, and this would be a 3-year international assignment at minimum. Also meeting with the lawyer next week about changing my will and life insurance to make Vanessa the sole beneficiary. The policy is now at $2 million with the company's executive package. She deserves that security. Love you, Nathan. When I emerged from the bathroom, Vanessa was preparing dinner, acting as if she hadn't moved from the stove. But the laptop had been shifted slightly, and her cheeks were flushed. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Perfect, she replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Just thinking about how lucky I am. That night, after she fell asleep, I created another document and saved it in a folder labeled Personal Private that I knew she regularly snooped through. This one outlined our future life plan. Year 1. Move to Singapore for work assignment. Live frugally to maximize savings. Begin trying for first child immediately after wedding. Year 2. Return to US. Move into in-law suite at parents' house to save for down payment while raising baby. Vanessa to be stay-at-home mother while I work extended hours. Year 3. Purchase starter home in Clarksdale, near parents. Try for second child. Weekly Sunday dinners with extended family mandatory. It was a masterpiece of subtle psychological torture. A life plan that contradicted everything Vanessa had ever expressed wanting. The metropolitan career woman who valued independence above all would supposedly be transformed into a suburban housewife, living with in-laws, surrounded by children, trapped in small-town America. The effect was immediate and dramatic. At our friend Taylor's birthday party that weekend, I innocently mentioned the potential Singapore relocation while Mike was within earshot. It would be such an adventure, I enthused, my arm around Vanessa's stiff shoulders. 3 years minimum in Southeast Asia, maybe longer if things go well. Mike's expression darkened. 3 years overseas? That's a big commitment. Vanessa, you'd be okay leaving your job, your friends, everything here? The tension between them was palpable, as Vanessa forced a smile. We haven't really discussed the details yet. No need to decide immediately, I said cheerfully. But my boss needs an answer by next month, right after the wedding. Later that evening, I pretended to be engrossed in conversation with Taylor's husband while monitoring Mike and Vanessa's heated exchange on the patio. Their whispered argument grew increasingly animated until Vanessa stormed back inside, her carefully applied makeup smudged around her eyes. The following week, I noticed a marked change in Vanessa's behavior. She became distant about wedding preparations, suggesting we might want to postpone things until we're more settled. Yet simultaneously, she grew more physically affectionate, initiating intimacy with an almost desperate frequency, clearly attempting to strengthen her emotional hold while she recalibrated her plans. Mike, meanwhile, shifted strategies entirely. He appeared at my office one afternoon, suggesting we grab lunch like old times. I'm worried about you, man, he said earnestly, as we settled into a corner booth at a nearby restaurant. This Singapore thing seems sudden, and the wedding planning. It's a lot of pressure at once. I appreciate the concern, I replied, watching him carefully. But I've never been more sure of anything in my life. What about Vanessa's career? Her family's all here. Have you really thought about what you're asking her to give up? I smiled. You seem very concerned about my fiancé's happiness. His eyes widened slightly before he recovered. Just looking out for both of you. That's what friends do. True friendship is rare, I agreed, maintaining eye contact until he looked away uncomfortably. So tell me, how's your financial situation these days? I remember you mentioned some investment troubles. The abrupt change of subject caught him off guard. It's manageable. Why? Just concerned about my best man, I replied easily. Especially with the destination bachelor party coming up. Don't worry about the costs, by the way, I've got it covered. His relief was visible, but short-lived, as I added. After all, I've recently updated my financial planning. Substantial life insurance, generous retirement package. It's important to protect the people you love, don't you think? The implication hung between us. Was I suggesting that I knew about their scheme? Or was I inadvertently revealing how vulnerable I'd be if something happened to me after the wedding? Mike's uncertainty was exactly what I wanted. Doubt and paranoia were powerful tools, ones that would soon tear apart their alliance from within. 2 days later came the moment I'd been anticipating. Vanessa announced she needed a girls' weekend to clear her head before the final weeks of wedding planning. I encouraged her enthusiastically, suggesting she use our reserved honeymoon suite at the Grand Plaza Hotel for a luxurious retreat. "Are you sure?" she asked, seemingly touched by the gesture. "That suite is expensive." "You're worth every penny," I assured her, knowing exactly how she would use the opportunity. Less than 4 hours after she checked in, the hidden camera I'd installed during a surprise visit to the hotel's hospitality office captured Mike's arrival. I watched on my phone as they embraced in the doorway, as champagne was poured, as they sprawled across the bed that should have been the start of my married life. "To us," Mike toasted, clinking his glass against Vanessa's. "And to freedom. Just 4 more weeks of pretending, then he'll never know what hit him." I smiled in the darkness of my apartment, tapping the hotel's app to order their first round of room service. Caviar, oysters, and a $500 bottle of wine. "Enjoy," I whispered, adding a generous tip and charging it all to the room. They thought I was devastated, hiding away after catching glimpses of their affair. They had no idea this wasn't my first time living through this betrayal. This time, I was prepared. And this was just the beginning of their very long, very expensive night. The accident that should have ended my life still appears in my dreams. The squealing tires on wet pavement, the sickening moment of weightlessness as my car broke through the guardrail, the rush of dark water rising around me, cold and final. But what happened after wasn't darkness. It was fluorescent lights and the antiseptic smell of hospital corridors, machines beeping steadily beside my bed, nurses checking vitals with practiced efficiency. I didn't die in that accident. I survived, barely, only to wake to a nightmare worse than drowning. 6 months. That's how long I lay in a coma while the world moved on without me. 6 months during which Vanessa and Mike built their new life using the shattered pieces of mine. They married in a quiet ceremony 3 months after my accident, using the very venue deposits I'd paid for. The insurance money, a modest policy through my employer, funded their fresh start. They told everyone I'd given them my blessing before the crash, that I'd wanted them to be happy if anything ever happened to me. A convenient narrative for a man who couldn't contradict it. I might never have known any of this if not for Marie, a night shift nurse with an exceptional memory for faces. She was processing paperwork when she noticed something odd. My emergency contact information listed my parents, who had been notified when I was admitted. Yet in 6 months, I'd had no visitors. "That can't be right," she told her supervisor. "His family should have been here." The subsequent investigation revealed the awful truth. Vanessa and Mike had informed everyone that I had died shortly after the accident. My apartment had been emptied, my accounts drained, my personal effects distributed or discarded. My identity had been effectively erased while I lay unconscious, fighting to return to a life that no longer existed. The hospital social worker assigned to my case was preparing for the difficult task of helping me rebuild from nothing when another twist of fate intervened. The identity verification process triggered an alert in a private investigation firm's database. 3 days after I regained consciousness, a distinguished man in his 60s appeared in my hospital room, studying me with eyes that seemed vaguely familiar. "You look like your father," he said finally, his voice gruff with emotion. "I should have found you years ago." The man was Victor Chen, my mother's brother, an uncle I'd never known existed. My mother had cut ties with her wealthy family when they disapproved of her marriage, and they were never mentioned during my childhood. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 18, I'd been completely alone, or so I thought. Victor had been searching for me for years, hiring investigators who repeatedly lost my trail as I moved between cities for college and early career opportunities. The hospital's identity verification finally connected us. "You're the sole heir to the Chen fortune," he explained, showing me documentation that made my head spin. "Your grandfather regretted the estrangement from your mother until his dying day. Everything was placed in trust for her children. The modest inheritance I'd expected from my parents had been supplemented by a trust that had been growing for decades. I wasn't just financially secure, I was wealthy beyond comprehension, the kind of wealth that could rebuild a life, the kind that could demand justice. They think I'm dead," I told Victor after explaining what Vanessa and Mike had done. "Maybe it's better that way for now." My uncle understood immediately. Over the next year, as I recovered and rehabilitated, we created a plan. Victor used his connections to establish a new corporate identity for me. Nathan Foster became Nicholas Chen, hospitality entrepreneur and venture capitalist. My appearance changed. Different hairstyle, designer wardrobe, subtle cosmetic procedures to alter features that might be recognized. I immersed myself in learning the business world under Victor's guidance. We acquired properties, including a boutique hotel chain with locations in major cities. One of our first purchases was the Grand Plaza, where Vanessa and Mike had been planning to celebrate their union after my original wedding was called off. The rebirth experience I'd originally attributed to some cosmic second chance was actually the result of meticulous planning. After fully recovering, I began tracking Vanessa and Mike from afar, studying their patterns and vulnerabilities. I manipulated events to recreate their betrayal under circumstances I controlled, setting the stage for a revenge years in the making. Every meeting, every coincidence, every revelation had been calculated. I hadn't magically traveled back in time. I'd orchestrated an elaborate scenario that mirrored my past while giving me complete control over the outcome. And now, watching them celebrate their deception in a hotel I owned, charging expensive room service to an account I controlled, I felt the satisfying click of a plan's final pieces falling into place. I ordered more room service as I watched them through the camera, this time a midnight feast of Wagyu steak and rare vintage champagne. Then a 3 a.m. delivery of imported cheese and truffles. By dawn, I'd arranged for breakfast in bed, the works with custom Bloody Marys and beluga caviar. Each time they accepted the deliveries with increasingly drunken gratitude, signing for every exorbitant charge without examining the mounting bill. They were celebrating their victory, unaware they were financing their own downfall. At 8:37 a.m., I sent the final instruction to the hotel manager, a loyal employee who followed my unusual requests without question, especially after the substantial bonus I'd authorized. It was time to spring the trap. Vanessa's phone rang at precisely 9 a.m. Through the hidden camera, I watched her fumble groggily for it, her makeup smeared across the pillowcase, Mike's arm draped possessively across her waist. "Hello?" she mumbled. The hotel manager's voice was crisp and professional. "Good morning, Miss Taylor. I'm calling regarding the charges to your suite. The total has exceeded the hotel's standard limit, and we need to process payment immediately." She sat up slowly, confusion clouding her features. "What charges? Everything should be on my fiancé's corporate account." "Yes, there appears to be some confusion about that. The room service orders from last night total $4,782, not including the champagne packages and premium spirits." 4,000? Vanessa's voice rose sharply. "There must be a mistake. We only ordered a few things. I have the itemized bill ready at the front desk, Miss Taylor. Perhaps you could come down to review it. We also need to discuss the noise complaint filed by neighboring guests at approximately 2:30 a.m. Mike was now fully awake, grabbing the phone from Vanessa's hand. Look, whatever the bill is, just charge it to the room. Nathan Foster authorized everything. I'm afraid Mr. Foster's corporate account has declined the charges due to suspected fraudulent activity. If you could please come to the front desk to resolve this matter. Fine, Mike snapped, ending the call. He turned to Vanessa, his expression darkening. What the hell is going on? I thought you said this was taken care of. It was. Nathan gave me the reservation as a gift. He said everything was prepaid. Vanessa's voice trembled as she gathered her robe around her. This doesn't make sense. They dressed hurriedly, their romantic morning evaporating into tension and recrimination. I watched with satisfaction as they argued in hushed, urgent tones about whose fault this was and how to handle the situation. 20 minutes later, they stood at the front desk, reviewing a bill that made Vanessa's face drain of color. The manager was apologetic but firm. As you can see, the charges are quite substantial. The presidential suite alone is $2,000 per night, and with the room service orders... We'll pay it, Mike interjected, sliding his credit card across the counter with a confidence I knew was false. Based on the financial records I'd accessed, his cards were all near their limits. As the manager processed the payment, there was a commotion near the elevators. A hotel security officer approached the front desk, his expression professionally neutral. Excuse me, but we've had a complaint about unauthorized persons in the presidential suite. Hotel policy requires all guests to be registered. Mike straightened defensively. I'm a guest of Miss Taylor here. There's no problem. The security officer checked his tablet. I see Miss Taylor is registered as a single occupant. Additionally, this suite is part of the owner's reserved inventory and requires special authorization for guests. The owner? Vanessa repeated, confusion evident. What are you talking about? My fiancé reserved this room months ago for our honeymoon. The front desk manager and security officer exchanged glances. The presidential suite is always held in reserve for Mr. Chen when he visits his properties. There must have been a misunderstanding in the booking system. He tapped his earpiece, listening intently before adding, In fact, Mr. Chen has just arrived and will be requiring the suite immediately. As if on cue, the hotel's main doors swished open. I strode through the elegant lobby, surrounded by an entourage of assistants and security personnel. My tailored suit, designer watch, and confident posture projected exactly the image I'd cultivated. Successful, powerful, untouchable. I approached the desk with measured steps, aware of every eye in the lobby turning toward me. The manager stepped forward with practiced deference. Mr. Chen, welcome back. We're preparing the presidential suite for you now. There was a slight booking error that we are resolving. I nodded acknowledgement, then allowed my gaze to drift casually toward Vanessa and Mike. I watched recognition dawn in slow, horrifying waves. First came confusion, the natural response to seeing someone vaguely familiar in an unexpected context. Then disbelief, as features aligned with memory. Finally, the blood-draining shock of impossible truth. Nathan? Vanessa whispered, her voice barely audible. I smiled pleasantly, as if greeting casual acquaintances. I believe you have me confused with someone else. I'm Nicholas Chen, owner of the Grand Plaza Hotel chain. I extended my hand toward the manager. Is my suite ready? Mike recovered first, his expression shifting from shock to anger to calculation in rapid succession. Cut the bullshit. What kind of sick game are you playing? I raised an eyebrow, my voice cool. Security? Is there a problem here? The security officer stepped forward, but Mike pushed past him, invading my personal space with desperate intensity. Listen, Nathan, or Nicholas, whatever you're calling yourself, we need to talk. Privately. This is all a misunderstanding. I don't believe we've been introduced, I replied calmly, and I don't make a habit of private conversations with agitated strangers in my hotels. Vanessa approached slowly, her eyes never leaving my face. It's really you, isn't it? She breathed. But how? They said you died in the accident. They seem to have been mistaken, I replied, finally acknowledging our shared history with the smallest of smiles. How unfortunate for you. Mike's demeanor shifted abruptly, anger giving way to a desperate bargaining tone. Look, this has all gotten out of hand. I don't know how you engineered this whole scenario, but we can work something out. I'll leave town, leave Vanessa. You'll never hear from me again. We can just forget everything and move on. Vanessa's head snapped toward him, betrayal fresh in her eyes. What are you saying? He's saying what he's always said when cornered, I explained, my voice carrying just enough for nearby staff to hear. Abandoning ship at the first sign of trouble. Vanessa stepped closer, tears welling in her eyes. Nathan, please, you have to let me explain. It wasn't what you think. Mike manipulated me, made me believe you didn't really love me. That's not true, Mike interjected, panic rising in his voice. Don't try to pin this all on me. You were the one who said he was boring, that you felt trapped. Fascinating, I interrupted, checking my watch with deliberate casualness. But I have a conference call in 20 minutes, and I still need to settle into my suite. I turned to the manager. Is the bill situation resolved? Not quite, sir, he replied. Mr. Bryant's card has been declined. We're still awaiting payment for the room service charges. Mike's face flushed dark red. This is ridiculous. You set us up. You ordered all that stuff through the hotel app. I raised an eyebrow. Serious accusations from someone occupying a suite reserved in my name. Perhaps we should continue this discussion with hotel security. Or would you prefer the police? I believe unauthorized use of hotel amenities exceeding a certain value constitutes fraud in this state. Vanessa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You wouldn't. I assure you I would. My voice hardened slightly. However, I'm willing to be reasonable. Pay your bill, vacate my suite, and we can discuss the situation like civilized people this afternoon. Mike's bluster crumbled. I can't. My cards are maxed out. This was supposed to go on Nathan's account. How unfortunate, I replied, without sympathy. I turned to Vanessa. And you? She fumbled in her purse, withdrawal and determination warring on her face. I have my emergency card, she muttered, avoiding Mike's accusing glare. As she handed over her credit card with trembling fingers, I nodded to my assistant. Arrange the Maple Room for a meeting at 3 o'clock. Miss Taylor and Mr. Bryant will be joining me. Mike stepped forward, desperation evident in every line of his body. Listen, Nathan. Mr. Chen, I corrected smoothly. Whatever you're calling yourself, this is insane. I don't know how you survived or how you pulled all this off, but we need to talk. There are things you don't understand. I studied him coldly. On the contrary, I understand everything perfectly. 3 o'clock, Maple Room. Don't be late. As I walked toward the elevators, I heard Vanessa's voice, small and broken. What are we going to do? Mike's response was too low to hear, but his desperate expression told me everything I needed to know. Their alliance was already fracturing, exactly as I'd planned. I spent the next few hours in a nearby office, not the presidential suite. I couldn't stomach the thought of the bed they'd shared. Instead, I reviewed security footage and prepared for our meeting, arranging documents in precise order for maximum impact. At precisely 3 o'clock, Vanessa and Mike were escorted into the Maple Room. They had clearly spent the intervening hours arguing. Vanessa's eyes were red-rimmed, and Mike's shirt was rumpled, his hair standing at odd angles where he'd run his hands through it repeatedly in frustration. They sat across from me at the polished conference table, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. Neither spoke first, waiting for me to set the tone. Power dynamics in their purest form. "I appreciate your punctuality," I began, my voice professionally neutral. "This won't take long." Vanessa leaned forward, her expression pleading. "Nathan, Nicholas, whatever you want us to call you, please just tell us what's going on. Everyone said you died in that accident." "How interesting," I replied, opening a folder before me. "Everyone? Including the hospital where I spent 6 months in a coma?" I slid a document across the table, my medical records, highlighting the admission and discharge dates. Mike barely glanced at it, his jaw working. "We were told you weren't expected to recover. The doctors said—" "The doctors said no such thing," I interrupted smoothly, producing another document, the attending physician's prognosis report. In fact, they were quite optimistic about my chances. Strange that such encouraging news never reached my emergency contacts. Vanessa's face crumpled. "I don't understand. We called the hospital every day at first. They told us—" "No, you didn't," I stated flatly. "The hospital has no record of any calls from either of you after the first week. No visits, no inquiries, nothing." I laid out more papers. Bank statements showing systematic withdrawals from my accounts while I was unconscious, the deed transfer for my apartment, email correspondence between them discussing what to do with my possessions. "It was a difficult time," Mike began defensively. "We were grieving, trying to make the best decisions. Including the decision to get married 3 months after my death? Using my venue deposits? Taking a honeymoon to Bali with my travel bookings? I kept my voice even as I presented evidence of each transgression. Receipts, social media posts, bank transfers." Vanessa was openly crying now. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We never meant to hurt you." "A curious statement," I remarked, considering this. I pressed a button on a remote, and the room's screen flickered to life, showing an email from Mike to Vanessa dated 2 weeks before my accident. It would be so much easier if something just happened to him. The insurance alone would set us up nicely. Plus, no messy breakup or explanations. Just saying. Vanessa's face went ashen. "That was a joke, a terrible joke. We didn't—" "'Cause my accident? I'm aware of that. Small mercies." I shut the folder decisively. "But you capitalized on it remarkably quickly." Mike finally lost his composure. "What do you want from us? Money? We don't have any. Revenge? Fine. You've clearly already planned it all out. Just tell us what the end game is here." I leaned back in my chair, studying them both. The woman I'd once planned to spend my life with, and the friend I'd trusted above all others. In my previous existence, their betrayal had broken me. Now I felt nothing but a cool detachment as I observed their panic. "That's an excellent question," I said calmly. "What do I want? Initially it was revenge. I spent months planning how to destroy you both, professionally, financially, personally." Vanessa flinched at each word. Mike's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. "I know about your struggling design firm, Vanessa. I know about the clients you've been courting, the loans you've taken out. I know about the industry blacklist you're on, Mike, after your last company discovered your embezzlement. Yes, I found that too." I slid 2 more documents across the table. A contract with Vanessa's biggest potential client, now signed with my company instead. Bank records showing Mike's financial teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. "One call from me, and what remains of your careers vanishes completely," I continued dispassionately. "Your reputations, your financial stability, everything." "You can't do this," Mike whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. "I already have," I replied. "The question is what happens next?" Vanessa looked up, hope flickering across her tear-stained face. "You're giving us a chance to make this right? We can pay you back, work something out." "No," I said simply. The word hung in the air between us, small but definitive. "No?" Mike repeated, confusion evident. No deals, no arrangements, no second chances. I closed my laptop with a soft click. You asked what I want. Initially, it was revenge, elaborate, meticulous revenge. I spent years planning it, anticipating this very moment. I stood, buttoning my suit jacket in an unhurried motion. But now that we're here, I realize something I didn't expect. Vanessa looked up, her expression caught between hope and dread. What's that? You were never worth the energy. I gathered my documents, sliding them into a leather portfolio. The revenge has already happened. Your careers are effectively over. Your relationship, I gestured between them, is clearly imploding. And I've moved on to a life so far beyond what we shared that this feels like closing a book I read long ago. Mike stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. That's it? You ruin us and walk away? After all this elaborate setup? The setup, I explained calmly, was as much for me as for you. I needed to be certain. Certain of what? Vanessa asked quietly. That I was truly free of you both. That seeing you again, confronting you, wouldn't reopen old wounds. I moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, you've given me a gift. The absolute certainty that cutting you from my life was the best thing that ever happened to me. Mike lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my arm. You smug bastard! You think you can just walk away after destroying everything we've built? I looked pointedly at his hand until he released me, tension radiating from every line of his body. Everything you built, I repeated slowly, was constructed on the foundation of my destroyed life. Consider this an overdue correction. I opened the door, where 2 security officers waited discreetly. These gentlemen will escort you from the premises. Neither of you is welcome at any property in the Chen Hospitality Group. Should you attempt to contact me again, the additional evidence I've gathered will be forwarded to the appropriate authorities. Vanessa made one last, desperate attempt. Nathan, please. I did love you once. Doesn't that count for anything? I considered her question seriously, studying the woman who had once been the center of my world. No, I said finally. It doesn't? As I walked away, I heard Mike's angry accusations and Vanessa's tearful denials fade into the background. Their voices, once so important to me, now seemed as distant and meaningless as static on an old radio. I had expected to feel triumph, or perhaps closure. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Lightness. The weight of vengeance, carried for so long, finally lifted from my shoulders. I wouldn't be seeing either of them again. The Mediterranean sunset paints the sky in impossible colors, amber and rose gold melting into deepening purple at the horizon. From the terrace of my villa, perched on the cliffs of Positano, the view stretches endlessly across water that shimmers like hammered copper in the fading light. It's been a year since the confrontation at the Grand Plaza. A year of building rather than plotting, of looking forward instead of back. The revenge I'd spent so long crafting did bring closure, but not in the way I'd anticipated. The true liberation came not from watching Vanessa and Mike suffer, but from finally releasing the hold they had on my life. The Chen Hospitality Group has thrived under my direction, expanding into new markets across Europe and Asia. But our most meaningful venture has been the Fresh Start Foundation, an organization providing support for victims of financial abuse and fraud. The foundation offers legal assistance, temporary housing, and career rehabilitation services, inspired by my own experience of having my identity essentially erased while I was incapacitated. Victor calls weekly, our relationship evolving from business partnership to genuine family connection. His guidance has been invaluable, but more importantly, his presence has filled a void I hadn't fully acknowledged, the need for family, for belonging. As for Vanessa and Mike, I keep my promise to myself and maintain no contact. Occasionally, news reaches me through industry channels. Their professional collapse was swift and comprehensive. Mike eventually filed for bankruptcy. Vanessa returned to her hometown to work in her father's hardware store. Their relationship fractured under the pressure of mutual recrimination and blame, exactly as I'd predicted. I thought I would feel satisfaction at their downfall. Instead, I feel nothing at all. Their story no longer intertwined with mine. The ringing of my phone interrupts my sunset contemplation. A call from the hotel manager at our Amalfi property, reporting a minor crisis with a VIP guest whose reserved car service failed to appear at the airport. "Send my personal driver," I instruct, making a quick decision, "and upgrade their accommodation to the Oceanic suite as an apology for the inconvenience." As I end the call, I hear the distinctive sound of a car engine sputtering on the narrow road below my villa. The vintage Alfa Romeo that had passed by earlier has apparently given up the fight halfway up the steep incline. Through the bougainvillea-draped railing, I can see a woman standing beside the stranded vehicle, hands on her hips in obvious frustration. My first instinct is to call for assistance on her behalf, then retreat inside. Despite the success of my business, I still maintain careful boundaries with strangers, a habit formed from hard experience. But something, perhaps the golden light of the fading day, or the simple human connection of witnessing someone in need, propels me down the stone steps toward the road. "Car trouble," I call as I approach, keeping a respectful distance. She turns, brushing copper-colored hair from her face. "Just typical Italian romance," she replies with unexpected humor. "Beautiful, but completely unreliable. The rental company assured me this classic would make it up these hills." I smile despite myself. "Those rental agencies have a creative relationship with the truth. Where are you trying to get to?" "Hotel Poseidon." She gestures vaguely up the winding road. "It's my first time in Positano, and I thought arriving in style would set the right tone. Clearly, the universe had other ideas." There's something refreshing about her manner. Direct, unaffected, with no hint of the calculation I've grown accustomed to detecting in those who recognize me or my position. "I can call you a taxi," I offer, reaching for my phone. "Or my driver could take you, if you're comfortable with that. He's just returning from an airport run." She studies me for a moment, clearly weighing the safety of accepting help from a stranger. "You live around here?" I gesture toward the villa above us. "Just up there." Local knowledge is always valuable, she decides with a nod. "I'd appreciate the help, thank you. I'm Claire, by the way." "Nicholas," I reply, using the name I've fully embraced in my new life. As we wait for my driver, our conversation flows with surprising ease. Claire is an architectural photographer on assignment to capture the iconic buildings of the Amalfi Coast. She's intelligent, observant, and refreshingly direct. "So, Nicholas, who lives in a spectacular villa and has a personal driver," she says with a slight smile, "what do you do when you're not rescuing stranded tourists?" For a moment, I consider my usual response, a vague reference to hospitality investments that usually discourages further questions. But there's something about the fading day and this chance encounter that feels like a page turning. "I run a hotel group," I say simply. "Nothing too exciting?" "I disagree," she replies immediately. "Hotels are fascinating intersections of architecture, design, and human experience. They're artificial environments created specifically to make people feel something. At home, luxurious, adventurous." Her perspective catches me off guard. I've never thought of it quite that way. "Occupational hazard," she explains. "I spend too much time thinking about why spaces make us feel the way they do." When my driver arrives, I make a spontaneous decision. Would you like to have coffee before heading to your hotel? There's a small cafe just up these steps with a remarkable view of the sunset. She hesitates, then smiles. I'd like that. Though I should warn you, I ask a lot of questions. Professional curiosity. As we climb the ancient stone steps toward the cafe, I realize I haven't felt this unburdened in conversation for years. There are no calculations, no protective barriers, no need to stay 3 steps ahead. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I'm simply present in the moment, with no thought of past betrayals or future maneuvers. When we reach the cafe terrace, the owner greets me by name, rushing to prepare my usual table. Claire raises an eyebrow, clearly reassessing her initial impression of me. Just local knowledge, I explain with a small smile. Valuable, like you said. As we settle at the table overlooking the deepening twilight, I notice how the last rays of sunlight catch the copper in her hair, how her eyes crinkle slightly when she smiles. I feel a strange lightness in my chest, not the absence of weight I'd experienced when walking away from Vanessa and Mike, but something more buoyant, more alive. So, Nicholas, she says, leaning forward slightly, tell me something real about yourself, something that isn't on a business card or website bio. The question would normally trigger my defenses, but instead I find myself considering it thoughtfully. I used to think revenge was the path to closure, I say finally. I was wrong. Her eyes widen slightly at this unexpected revelation. That's not where I thought that was going. Too heavy for a first conversation? I ask, suddenly aware that I may have misjudged the moment. But Claire shakes her head, a genuine smile spreading across her face. No, just unexpected and interesting. She raises her coffee cup in a small toast. To unexpected conversations with strangers who might not stay strangers. As I lift my own cup to meet hers, I realize that for months I've been free of the constant habit of checking security cameras, predicting other people's motives, staying 3 steps ahead of potential betrayal. The weight of always being vigilant has lifted so gradually I barely noticed its absence. Whatever happens next, with this conversation, with Claire, with the life I continue to build, will be something genuinely new. Something neither of us has lived before. And for the first time in years, I'm ready to embrace that uncertainty with an open heart.